Hey, I'm Chuck Tweedy. I'm a one-man shop guitar builder, and I have recently fallen in love with walnut, and I started searching it out. I found an amazing source of walnut, and I have an amazing billet of curly walnut here that I'm going to show how to resaw. This is black walnut, which is in its green state. It's unkiln dried. It's still wet, straight from the tree. I got it from Randy Roberts at Walnut Rescue in Omaha, Nebraska. He takes these slabs directly from the mill where they've been cut, and is cutting and processing them ready for guitar builders like myself to cut up green and air dry. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut this up, air dry it, and show you the process that I go through in cutting it up. But first let me show you a little bit more about the wood. Okay. You can see the wood is nearly 3 inches thick. It's quarter sawn all the way across the billet, all the way through. It's got a nice clean distinction between the heartwood and the sapwood. The sapwood is nice and white because it hasn't been steam processed, which causes the color to bleed between the layers and into the sapwood. The color, I don't know if the video can show it very well, but it's almost purple. It's an incredible chocolate brown color, and it has deep, deep flame. It's going to be difficult for me to tip it up on its end because it's very heavy because it's green, and I got the camera in my other hand. Now, let's see if I can do it. Okay. So maybe that shows the color a little bit better. And you can see the deep curl, and you can see how wide it is. That's a jumbo pattern that I've drawn right at the edge of the sapwood. And you can see it's easily wide enough for that. And the curl goes all the way through the whole entire billet. It's all the same thickness. It's been sealed both ends, and this face has been jointed and is perfectly perpendicular to this face, which has also been jointed. So it's ready to go, and next thing I'll do is scribe a line on it and get my bandsaw ready and start making slices. All right, now it's time to cut up the wood. And I'm going to cut it into 3 sets, guitar sets, so that's 12 pieces, because I'm going to get back and sides for 3 sets. And to do that, I'm going to cut it into, from the thickness down to 195 thousandths, almost 200 thousandths, and I've got that set on a marking gauge. So I'm going to take that marking gauge and I'm going to run it down this corner, because this is the bottom side is where I'm going to put it on the table of the saw. This is what I'm going to be able to see, and this is the face I'm going to put against the fence. And then I'm going to cut along this line, and I have my resaw set up so that I cut relative to a line, and I'll show you that when I get set up on the saw. For my resawing, I have a Grizzly 17-inch bandsaw. On that saw, I've got a 3/4 inch wide wood slicer blade that you can get from Highland Hardware, and I have a resaw fence, which is basically a giant tube of cardboard. That's about 6 inches, 5 inches in diameter. It has a threaded rod that holds it down with the cross piece down to a threaded insert. That way I can adjust it back and forth. I've roughly drawn a line at the high point, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, where it's going to contact the wood. I line that up basically with the cutting edge, just a little bit behind it. And then in front of that I have a small featherboard that keeps the bottom of the wood pushed up against this so that I can guide the top of the wood, and I know that it's all cutting everything at the same thickness. You can see that it's going to be hard to see, but you can see that it's doing a great job. That's very uniform thickness all the way through. All the way through the whole piece of wood is all the same thickness. Nice cut off of that piece of wood. So that's the setup. I have you know, dust collection, so everything's nice and clean. And I'm going to get back to it. So now to clean up the billet between cuts, I'm sanding the billet through my thickness sander, and you can see that, you know, here's a thick spot, so that must be a thin spot on the cut that I made. It's also sanding a lot more along the top edge. What was the top edge, which is the sapwood edge, and so my cut is probably thicker at the bottom than it is at the top, so now I can adjust that. The whole cut was thinner than my goal, and so I got plenty of adjustment, and I still have plenty of wood left on the billet to make my 12 cuts, 12 slices. I'm in the middle of the billet now, and I've got what have I got? 5 slices off of it right now. They're stacking. Well, I've got 5 that are stacked. And I just finished one, and the center of the billet has very different color than the outside. And when it's fresh cut, you can see that it's actually it looks wet. It looks very green. It looks very interesting. But it's cutting very great. It's no problem. I've been running it through the thickness sander between every shot, doing my marking my line, and it's going good. I'm 6 slices in, so I should be about halfway. I'm going to check my thickness, and if the thickness is about half of what I started with, then I'm good to go. I got 6 more slices in it. So now I am melting a big puddle of paraffin, and you can see the last of my bars. It's just that regular household paraffin that you buy at the market, usually used for canning. And I'm going to dip my slices into these. Alright, I am done cutting. And I have my 12 slices. I'm stacking them right now with stickers between each. I got 4 stickers about a foot apart, 1 at each end, 1 in the middle. I'm stacking them so that they're on top of each other. So when I put pressure on it at the end, they all form a nice big column of structure for the stack. You can see I'm stacking them in the order that I cut them, so everything's easy to identify. And at the end, I'm going to put another board. You notice I've got it on a piece of plywood. So I'm going to just make one big sandwich out of this thing. Plywood strip at the bottom, all of the pieces stickered together, and then under the board at the top, and I'll probably put a big brick on top of that, and that will be the final thing. I've got all the ends sealed. You can see the color of the wood with the paraffin in it, and it's just going to be an awesome set. 3 sets of curly walnut. It's going to be great. It's going to take a while to dry, but I am really excited to build guitars out of this wood once it is dry. Okay.
Now,
I've stickered and stacked the wood up in a high dry place where it can dry for probably about 6 months, and I'll be able to use it after that, and then I can make new guitars out of that wood. I did learn one thing while I was cutting up the wood. I wish I had a carbide tip blade. I went through 2 of the steel wood slicer blades, and a carbide tip blade, even if it had a wider kerf, would have been fine. I had plenty of wood, and it would have just been a lot easier to cut, and I wouldn't have dulled up the blade and had to cut a few slices with a dull blade. So remember, the wood comes from Randy Roberts of Walnut Rescue in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm Chuck Tweedy of Midnight Lutherie. So I hope you learned something about slicing up a big piece of wood.